told to be a good girl by your family, please others, don't make mistakes, keep the peace. South Asian communities emphasize sacrifice culture, and many of us experienced some form of this growing up. Maybe it's the rebel in me, but something about this idea always made me want to break free and challenge this mindset. I think good girl syndrome is detrimental to women, so I'm exploring the topic and how to shift internalized habits in today's solo episode. Welcome back to Through the Looking Glass podcast. My name is Lavanya. My goal is to empower listeners, even in the smallest way possible, and improve your well-being. If you found my podcast and enjoying it, please take a minute to follow and rate the show. It really would make a huge difference for a brand new show and lets me know I'm doing a good job. So, what does it mean to be a good girl? Quiet, kind, please everyone, get it right the first time, don't make mistakes, make sacrifices, avoid conflict, maintain the peace, forgive, and bring harmony to the home. Are boys told the same thing? From a young age, boys and girls are treated differently, whether it's intentional or generational trauma. Often in the South Asian community, you are taught people-pleasing, perfectionism, and putting others first, particularly girls. The idea of a good girl is typically rooted in how people, both within your family and outside, like teachers, interact with young girls. It may look like being told to get good grades. Academic achievements equal praise and validation. Often girls are taught to value beauty highly and made to feel they need to appear a certain way to please people. The psychological term is Snow White syndrome, if you want to look it up. We are all too skinny or too fat in the eyes of society, and the goalpost is constantly moving. It boils down to the need for external validation and personal insecurity. It's honestly so hard to be a modern woman. The need to be a good girl impacts your mental health and ability to be happy in your daily life and relationships. As women, we question ourselves so much. We worry and fear of not being enough. Maybe you were the golden child in your family and taught to placate everyone. Make everything smooth for others. Don't rock the boat. Knowing the right thing to say and constantly figuring out how to make everyone else happy is honestly so exhausting. There are a lot of anxious traits associated with these internalized mindsets as well. Some of the side effects I've noticed in adulthood can be feelings of anger, frustration, and resentment. Trying to be convenient can be emotionally and physically draining. It is detrimental and often bleeds into your professional life too. Maybe you take on too much work because you can't say no, or working extra hard to get everything right the first time. Something I learned in business school is the importance to fail and fail fast. Making mistakes is how you grow a business. It makes me think about how different women and men think and why. More men start businesses and become entrepreneurs. Why are there less women in business? In the US, I believe only 30% of VC funding goes to female founders. While there's a lot of external factors and institutional inequality to consider and influence change to impact these trends, there's also a mindset shift amongst women that can and should be examined. Women in business are typically risk-averse, and even in my career, I've been told by other women to be careful not to make mistakes. There is this cycle of victimhood associated with the idea of a good girl that is leading to low self-respect and self-esteem. Whether you are pursuing an ambitious career path or trying to take meaningful steps in breaking generational patterns, getting unstuck from the cycle of playing the good girl can be so liberating. The remainder of the episode, I want to focus on 5 steps you can take to shift your mindset out of being a good girl and focus on improving your personal wellness. Step 1 is understand the principle that convenient girls are the ones who get left behind. People who have likes and dislikes are seen as authentic. When you hide your personality, you are doing a disservice to yourself. Being agreeable isn't always a good thing. It can be small things like ordering food, helping a loved one. Stop pretending like you don't have an opinion. Be inconvenient. Maybe you did internalize good girl ideology, but it's time to unlearn these behaviors. Maybe good girl syndrome is manifesting in your life in the form of not being able to say no to friends, family, or coworkers. You could be taking on too many things and neglecting self-care time. This plays into being a people pleaser too, right? I think the idea of being polite is so highly emphasized in South Asian culture that it's sometimes projected as offensive to say no. But the reality is, everyone is responsible for their own life and self-care. Next time your aunt is calling you to come over and help with a personal project, but you have other things to do, say no if it's not going to work for you. Be inconvenient. Choose yourself. I promise that person will recover and figure it out for themselves. Most of the time, it's not that deep. It doesn't need to cost you your peace, comfort, or freedom. If there's one thing you can take away, stop putting so much pressure on yourself to be everything for everyone. No one can be everywhere at the same time. You are not superhuman. Treat yourself with the respect and love that you give others. And that could start with being inconvenient and placing importance on your own needs. That brings me to my next tip. You need to learn how to speak up for yourself and set boundaries. No one is going to advocate better for you than you can. Going back to the cultural emphasis on being nice, polite, and helping others, these are not inherently bad traits. It can be lovely qualities, and I was taught that too. But the world is a mixed bucket. Not everyone will appreciate and reciprocate how you treat them. I've certainly been burned by people who took advantage of my kindness. Some people just test your boundaries, and when they see you as a good girl, they think they can get away with anything. You can be so deep in it that you don't even realize how draining it is to be perfect all the time. Learning how to set boundaries is one of the most impactful skills I've developed in my 20s. You can do it too. It doesn't make you a bad person to stand up for yourself. Like I said in step 1, say no when it's not serving your own needs and wants. Speak up when you're not comfortable with something. It doesn't have to be this life-changing thing. Maybe you just don't feel like helping your mom that Sunday and just need time to decompress. That's a perfectly good reason to say no. Normalize saying, I can't help you today, Mom. I'll make time another day. Know your limits on how much mental or physical energy to give. Another example is being there emotionally for family. Everyone needs to vent at times, but don't take in too much when you don't have that mental bandwidth. That's another great boundary to practice. Focus on managing your internal experiences and responses. Ultimately, that's all that's in your control. You cannot be there for others when you haven't fulfilled your own needs, and that does not make you a bad person. I think it makes you stronger and capable on your own before you help others. Being kind and compassionate are amazing qualities, so know your feminine power. Let's shift from being a good girl to being a strong girl. The next step in my guide to unlearning good girl behaviors is learning your needs. I want you to reflect on this question. What do I need right now? Maybe letting go of people-pleasing and perfectionism is a new step for you. It can be overwhelming to understand your limits. If you're recognizing this as an area you need to work on, that's an amazing step to take. No one unlearns internalized behaviors overnight, so take the time to reflect on this question. Maybe start an iPhone notes section and catalog your thoughts when you get stuck. Over time, maybe there's a pattern, and that can help identify your limits. Good girls are used to asking, what do you need? There's so much emphasis on sacrificing in the name of family in South Asian culture. It's important to shift unhealthy traditional roles. Often, women take on the emotional load of the family, and that's part of being a good girl too. It's not fair or necessary to take on that responsibility solely. It's the leading cause of depression, stress, and anxiety in young girls. let's not normalize overgiving. To all the men who are listening, be a part of the solution, not the problem. PSA to young women, get to know your feminine energy. Go on your hot girl walk and tune into yourself. You can always start with small changes as a recovering people pleaser. The next step to focus on yourself is stop apologizing. This is a hard one for me too. I try to be self-aware of apologizing unnecessarily, but I think it's a horrible habit. I'm not speaking about apologizing for genuine reasons or when you make a mistake. I'm talking about the urge to start every sentence with, I'm sorry, but that's a sign of struggling with people pleasing and low self-esteem. For example, if you have work and can't attend an event, don't say, I'm sorry, but I can't make it to your event. Instead, try this. I won't be able to make it to your event, but next time, and have a good time. Over apologizing is enforcing the idea your needs are less important. It's okay if you slip up, we all do. As women, we are even expected to apologize at times when it's not our fault. Honestly, it's a messed up cultural norm. I'm curious, how many times do men say sorry in a day, if they even do at all? Another way to stop saying sorry a lot is replacing it with thank you. Sometimes I feel a little stuck on words and I get the urge to add a sorry. It helps to replace the word with thank you. That's still kind and polite, so it's an easier change. Try saying thank you for the suggestion, or some variant of that. You get the idea. Stop saying you're sorry. My last step to beat good girl syndrome for good is learn to sit in the discomfort. It's hard to say no or to stop over apologizing. I know it brings up discomfort for myself when I set boundaries and prioritize myself. We can't decode centuries of cultural norms in one generation. It is uncomfortable, so learning to be okay with it is important. Acknowledge your feelings, accept them. It's part of the personal growth. Change is uncomfortable for everyone. So stand your ground and take up as much space as is necessary. Instead of maintaining the peace for others, focus on inner peace and harmony. I have no doubt that will ruffle some feathers, but that just means you're making progress. Your body and mind are deeply connected. Work on noticing how your body responds to these moments of uncomfortable emotions. Try to minimize judging yourself and instead focus on validating your emotions. Find outlets to ground yourself and let it go. I personally like Headspace for their 3-minute guided meditations. It's a beginner-friendly meditation, and you can find similar guided meditations on YouTube as well. Self-development is never a linear journey, so it's okay to make mistakes. That's a natural part of growth and healing. The idea of a good girl is so deeply ingrained in our culture, and that's why I'm going to dedicate a whole month to exploring it. If you made it through my episode, thank you so much. This podcast is a safe place for personal development. I would love to hear from listeners on what resonated, stories, and suggestions. Wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for listening or watching the Looking Glass podcast.